Welcome to the Family Office Sherpa podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Parkin, founder and managing director of Hall Road Investments. The aim of this podcast is to provide practical and implementable advice for those looking to build, manage, or service a family office. This is not, however, investment advice, so please check the disclaimer in the show notes. In this episode, I go over one of the most important hires in the family office, the head of getting stuff done.
This is the Family Office Sherpa.
Now, in every well-functioning family office that I encounter, there's usually one role, and it's not always called out, but as an outsider, you always kind of see it. And it's not necessarily the title, but it's definitely the impact that they have. Some are called the general manager. Others called the CFO, CFEO, COO, CIO, whoever it ends up being. It might be the family member, but really what I see them as is the chief of getting things done in the office, moving projects along, making decisions, not necessarily investment decisions or anything like that, but really just like, okay, this has been made. This decision has been made on a project basis or a very top level, and this is how we're going to move forward. So that's who we're talking about today. Very important person within the office. So let's get started. So what makes them essential? The title isn't what matters. It's their function. So what they need to be able to do is they cut across multiple areas. They might cut across, if it's internal, they have finance, operations, investments, but what they importantly don't do is they don't undermine the people that have those titles, right? Or they are the person that has that title, might be the CFO or something like that, but they interact with everyone else. And admittedly, it tends to be someone that's usually in finance or operations because they're the functions that tend to be across the entire office, not just, say, the investment office or the operations or something like that. They tend to go across all of them. In leaner offices or first generation offices, they often come from the operating business. You see a lot of that. Trusted advisors come across from the operating business once the sale has happened or the liquidity event, and they're a trusted insider, but they know how to speak to the principals. They know how to really get things moving without causing agitation and conflict. Sometimes it's a family member, but more often than not, to be honest, it's the person, the family of the family members or the family's general, the family council or whatever it looks like, first delegates to. So if you're wondering who that person is, ask yourself, if this person left, would everything slow down or fall over? And that's generally your answer. I think the important thing is, who do we delegate to first? Some decision has been made, right, get this person, because this person will get it done. So the question for a lot of people is, isn't this the CEO, the chief executive officer, or whatever it ends up being? And not always. What you generally say is the CEO or the family member that takes on that kind of role or whatever that is, sets the direction of the office. This person, if it's not the CEO, gets it happen, gets it done. So you get the structure or the direction from the CEO. And then, like I said, the first delegation point tends to be this person. Like any business, execution and strategy tend to be different muscles. This is the person that turns the strategy into action without needing to meet for every step. Right? They're not managing via committee. So what are some of the traits that we see of an effective, let's call it a general manager? It's a pretty good title. My father was a general manager most of his career. He was not the CEO, but he was the person the CEO delegated to, like, this is what we need done, and that was his job, right? So what's the traits of an effective GM, right? They have to be a people person. They have to be able to build trust and navigate relationships. It's very hard to get things done if no one wants to talk to you, and very difficult to get things done if no one trusts you, that you might have their best interests at heart. Importantly, this person understands the family's purpose and aligns the decisions accordingly without having to keep going, does this match our purpose, our values? They know it intrinsically. important that are going to take initiative. They ask for responsibility and make decisions. So these persons tend to be very curious, but also very, aligned to, oh, that's what we're going to do. I would like the responsibility to get this done. And then they make the decisions. A lot of the time, this person is frustrated by inaction and can be that person that just says, well, let's just get stuff done. Let's just start things moving. And that's the person that we need in these smaller offices in particular. They can be an expert generalist. I think people have used that term a little bit as well, which basically knows enough across domains to coordinate and drive, but also knows how to go to the experts when required and not get in the way of the experts either, not causing blockages or circumventing them. It's a really, really difficult thing to navigate, but when it's done correctly and everyone feels like they're adding to it, but they've got this person that continually drives the project or the decision, it's a nice place to work. It really is. Like I said, they stay out of silos. So they may not directly oversee investments or legal or finance, but knows how they intersect. So really trying to create that, and I've mentioned this term before, which is this scaffolding, this support or connective tissue or whatever you want to call it, knows how to navigate that, knows how to knit that together really, really well. Also, they tend to shy away from calling meetings. There was one person that I worked in an office with, and I think they had a mug and it said, this meeting could have been an email, right? It was in the mug. And so when you came into the meeting, you're like, yeah, okay, maybe this could have been an email. And so it was always quite a nice little reflection point. But yeah, not managing by committee, not managing by, we have to have a meeting about a meeting about a meeting. It's not that kind of thing. So they're also really responsive on communications. One of my real bugbears and causes me no end of frustration is when you send an email and you're not sure if the person's seen it, or because they just haven't said, received or understood or something like that. I think it might be my old institutional relationship management background, where if someone sent me an email, if a client sent me an email, absolutely. Even if I still needed to go and find the information, or it was a larger sort of project, understood, received, anything like that, just to know that you've been heard is such a good thing. And being responsive on that is such a big thing in this space. I find that, that they tend to come from maybe advice or operational backgrounds, or even relationship management, those sort of backgrounds where you have to just to stay employed, have to get along with people, have to understand people's timelines are not necessarily your timelines, but also to be consistent in messaging, all these sorts of things that tend to come from advice or relationship management or managing operations. Like that's a really important skill, and it goes really, really well in family offices that are looking for this type of person, because they have a background of having to do that, to get along with people, to keep things moving, but to understand that and be empathetic. I think that's a really important thing. They've also got to be comfortable with hard conversations, whether internal or external. Sometimes it's you're dealing with people, but you're also dealing with family. You're also dealing with, complex, sometimes, emotions and all sorts of different things. So you have to be comfortable with slightly harder conversations. You can't just put your head under the desk and hope it all goes away. So, and that person really does, having those conversations in a way that is helpful, really does move things along. They've got a reliable memory, to be honest. And again, that probably goes back to that whole idea that maybe relationship managers and advice type of people work well in this, or consultants work well in this, because they have to remember things that were said, and they have to make sure that what they're doing aligns with that, even though it might not be written down or it might not be continuously reminded of. If you have that muscle memory of, I think we talked about this 6 months ago, or you mentioned this, just picking up on little things just to make sure that the people that you're working for and with, know that you're aligned to them. So that's in my experience anyway, that tends to be the people that get stuff done in these offices. A lot of people ask, can this be done on a fractional basis or consulting basis? Yes, I think you definitely can, but you have to have the right setup. Fractional doesn't mean unavailable. And when I say fractional, I mean you're taking the capacity of maybe a day a week or a day a month or whatever it ends up being of someone that works within this space. So there might be a fractional chief executive officer or fractional general manager or something like that. If you're doing that, it doesn't mean that there's spaces where there's not availability. You're not unavailable. So you just have to be on call when needed. And importantly, you have to be embedded within key workflows, which sounds a bit wanky, admittedly. But what that means is that if you've got workflows, you can't go, well, we can't finish this until this person comes back online tomorrow or next week or whenever they work, or they don't do this or they don't work Tuesdays or something. You have to be flexible, but you also need to be embedded so you can get things moving. You're not having to continually wait for someone to come back online. To be honest, it's why Hall Road, so my consulting business, Hall Road Investments, that's why I moved it to a retainer model, which is a monthly retainer model. Too often, when the previous iteration of the model was I would do projects and you give them the recommendation and the roadmap of implementation, and then you'd speak to people sometimes a year or two later and still nothing had changed, mostly because people have work to do, right? There's other people within the office that have very specific roles. And if there's no one that owns something, in this case, usually it was some, investment operations or a governance piece, then it didn't get moved to the next step. So now what I do is I sit within the investment committee or an advisor to that investment committee which often means moving things forward as we develop the investment office structure. That's proved to be a very effective method of almost like a fractional getting stuff done person, which tends to be what I enjoy doing. Importantly, they have to add, as an advocate, you've got to be free from conflicts in particular around sort of getting things to the next step. You've got to be able to speak on behalf of the office in particular to suppliers, and you've got to be given agency within the office as well. You've got to be trusted to take that on. Just as an example, in terms of costs and why people are looking at this from a fractional point of view is for leaner offices, a full-time general manager might be cost prohibitive, right? As an example, there's a recent 2025 Morgan Stanley Bottoff Consulting compensation report that came out, and I'll put that in the show notes, which shows that the median base salary for a CEO of a sub $1 billion family office is pushing around sort of that $500,000 US per annum. And for larger, more complex offices, that can be pushing up towards $1.5, $1.6 million, in compensation. So, if you could take a day of that a week or a day of that a month or something like that, something that would, you put the right structure in, that could be a really effective way of doing it. So what am I seeing is people are struggling to get things done? It's usually because there's unclear decision-making, particularly in sort of when there's more than one family where there's people that don't want to make the final call. I think the unclear component can be very frustrating to get things over the line. The other thing that I've seen is this over-reliance on consensus or managing to committees is very difficult to get anything done. And if you don't have that one person saying, no, I've made a decision, we're going to go this way, it can slow progress and creates a lot of inaction. The other thing is lack of accountability. If no one owns the execution, no one makes the decision. Like if you're not accountable for it, and accountability includes follow-up, then it doesn't get executed. The other thing I've seen is when there's a lack of inclusion, when people are either excluded or not told what we're trying to do, or what's, there's, include that just makes people resistant to change or resistant to getting things decided upon because they're not sure, which makes a total sense, right? So I think just being very clear and open, and again, being an advocate and empathetic and all these cool things, right? Like that's this person. And the other thing is being the challenge is that no one is in the office that owns the list of to-dos. So if you have someone that says, this is the list of to-dos that we've got, and I will take ownership of it and move every one of these forward because this is what we've decided to do. If you don't have someone that does that, it becomes very, very difficult. And like I said, one of the reasons why I moved the business model to being that, all right, these are the list of things that we're going to do, and I will be there on a monthly cadence, usually getting things moving forward, because that's my job. And having someone do that can be quite helpful. So that's it. So final thought, if you're building or rebuilding family office, don't underestimate this role. Sometimes like the expert generalist or general manager can be the first employee, getting that person in that says, all right, we know what we're doing and these are the implementation. When it gets to a certain size and complexity and there is a significant amount of family office services involved that might not be easy to manage and you need a bit more strategic, then bring someone in designated as a chief executive officer or someone like that, just to be a little bit more strategic if there's no one in the family looking to do it. But you still need that getting stuff done person. So that's it. If you found it of interest, please follow me on LinkedIn. Please ring the bell on this, on Spotify, Apple, or whatever you get your podcasts. And you can, if you're a family office that's looking for someone to help with getting stuff done, then please email me, Shaun, so SHAUN, @hallroad.com.au. Until next time, thank you.